Congressman. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. So you're going across the state talking about elections integrity and this bill that failed but will come back in a special session. Why is this so important to you?
Democracy's under attack in Texas and across the country. You have the most restrictive voter suppression bill here in our state that would eliminate Sunday voting, would allow the state to overturn lawful, legitimate elections, would make it harder for those with disabilities to be able to vote because they'd have to disclose personal medical information in order to vote an absentee ballot. But when you connect that to what's happening in Georgia and Florida and their voter suppression bills, the insurrection on the 6th of January, the big lie trafficked by Trump and his acolytes, then you realize that multiracial democracy in America is facing its greatest test, certainly in our lifetimes, but maybe in the life of this country. So I'm traveling the state to try to bring people together, Republicans and Democrats, red counties and blue ones as well, together to save this democracy, to push back and make sure that we can still vote and protect the right that so many have given their lives to defend and to expand.
When I interviewed Governor Abbott the other day, I asked him about some of the points that you made, and he says he does not believe that this bill is discriminatory in any fashion. What would you say to that?
I would respectfully point the governor to the provision in the bill that eliminates Sunday morning voting. That's been a mainstay of Texas elections for as long as I can remember, and it is disproportionately used by African American voters. Some people refer to it as souls to the polls. That is singularly targeted at one group in Texas, black voters. I would tell him that veterans who've served this country honorably and have come back with a service-connected disability will now have to disclose that personal, private medical information in order to vote by mail. They may not want to tell an elections official that they have PTSD or TBI or military sexual trauma. Now they will be forced to do that. So this discriminates against a large number of voters in a state that's already the toughest in which to vote.
You have created power by the people. Why, and what do you hope to accomplish?
Powered by People is a volunteer organization that last year alone registered more than 200,000 voters. This year is continuing that voter registration work, but is also ensuring that we organize people around this fight for democracy and voting rights. If we lose these rights, if we lose our democracy, there's a good chance that we won't get it back. So I want to make sure that we have the organizing power to bring people together to do this important work while we still have a chance.
Listening to you and just watching everything that was going on, I couldn't help but feel, boy, it does feel like 2022 already. And it's clear that you know how to attract a crowd, not only supporters, but also your opponents. What did you make of all of this?
I think people want to be engaged right now. I mean, in large part because we were all isolated in our homes for the last year, but I think more importantly, we all understand that our country is literally coming apart right now. I mean, many of the questions today in our conversation were about how to find common ground between Democrats and Republicans, Trump supporters and non-Trump supporters. And it's not going to happen on the internet. It's not going to happen over the TV. It's going to happen when we meet in person. And I think that's what brought so many people out today in Denton, earlier today in Gainesville, and our other stops across Texas.
But what did you make of all the honking? I mean, I read that the parade happened before, but I don't think this happened before.
Those Trump supporters who came out and tried to shout us down today, who came out with sirens and horns blaring to try to drown out the conversation we were having here, are very emblematic of the effort to suppress the vote and to intimidate voters in Texas. Instead of having a civil conversation where we can have opposing points of view and listen to one another and agree to disagree, but to do so agreeably, you have people shouting and yelling and blaring horns and trying to stop a peaceful meeting that's taking place in a public park. I think that says a lot about the two sides. One is for democracy and conversation, debate, and dialogue. The other wants to end it. And I think we have a choice before us, and we've got to make it.
A woman asked you today here, and I wanted to ask you, I read that the Texas Democratic Party chair said he was anxious about whether you're going to run for governor or not. And so it seems like a lot of people are counting on you to challenge the governor. It's a lot of pressure, is it not?
The greatest pressure I feel is helping to save our democracy right now. And I want to see this fight through for voting rights all the way. And after that, if there is some other way in which I can serve, running for office or supporting others who run for office, I'll do it. I mean, I'm in for the distance for Texas one way or another. It doesn't have to necessarily be as a candidate or holding office, but we'll cross that bridge once we pass this one, which is making sure that we protect the right to vote.
Why is there a reluctance, do you feel, from Democrats to run for governor?
It's still early. The filing deadline is 6 months away from now. And when you get into that campaign, as I know from running statewide in 2018, it is a long, grueling, brutal affair. There's 254 of these counties if you're going to do it right. And so I wouldn't be surprised if people are thinking about the scope and scale of the challenge and looking at the field and making their decisions. But I'm confident that Democrats will field a strong candidate.
And let me just ask you, do you worry that your comments at the Houston debate during the presidential debate in Houston, where you said, "Hell yes, we're going to take your guns," do you think that is going to haunt you if you decide to run?
I'd love it if you rephrase the question. I didn't say I will take your guns.
Okay. So, well,
I did say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did say that no one should have an AR-15 or an AK-47. And not only should we stop selling them, but we should buy back everyone that's out there in civilian hands. The reason being, a month before, 23 people were murdered in my community by a young man who had purchased an AK-47 and came to, as he put it, repel an Hispanic invasion. When you see what happened in El Paso with those 23 murdered, when you see the storming of the Capitol where 5 people were killed, when it's one mass shooting after another in a school, in a church, in a movie theater, in a shopping mall, we have to reach a point in this country where we realize that weapons of war belong on the battlefield and not in our homes. I have no problem with anyone having a weapon for self-defense, for sport, for hunting. We have a proud tradition of gun ownership and responsible gun ownership at that in Texas. But no one needs to have a weapon of war.
But do you think that will be held against you? Do you have a comment?
It doesn't matter to me because I've got one chance to do the right thing. And I know the right thing is to speak out against the level of gun violence that we have in this country. And it really doesn't matter to me how politically popular or unpopular that is. I think what's asked of us in this one life that we have to live is to do the right thing while we can. And I know saying that uncomfortable truth, that we shouldn't have weapons of war that can fire 30 rounds in 3 seconds, that can kill 23 people in a Walmart in a matter of minutes, and that continue to pose a threat to Americans everywhere. I know saying that is the right thing to do, and the consequences, be they what they may.
2 other questions. I really appreciate your time, and that is, what factors will be going into your decision on whether to run for governor or any other office in 2022?
I'm just so focused on this fight for voting rights. I want to make sure that we protect access to the ballot. I want to do everything I can to help President Biden see the necessity of meeting this crisis with the urgency it demands. He must use all of the power at his disposal to pass the For the People Act, which is the voting rights act of our day and our age. If we fail in that, we might very well lose this democracy. So there's nothing more important than that. If we can see that through, then I would consider another way in which I could serve. But until then, I think this is the fight to be in.
Last question, and that is, on Saturday we saw Deborah Peoples lose her opportunity to win for Fort Worth mayor. Last month we saw a Democrat did not make it to the runoff for the 6th congressional district. What does that say about the state of the Democratic Party, at least in North Texas, if anything?
It's going to be very tough to change this state from one that's dominated by Republicans at almost every level of government to one that has representation by Democrats and Republicans alike. But we're making progress. I was the first candidate to win Tarrant County in more than 20 years. Joe Biden then won it last year. Biden improved upon the margin that Hillary Clinton lost by. She improved upon the margin that Barack Obama lost by. So we're making progress. It's slower than many of us would like to see. But that's why I emphasize today that if we're willing to get out there and register voters, to talk to people not just in an election year, but in 2021 where no one is on the ballot, then we have a chance to continue to make up ground and start winning some of these races. And I'm going to do everything I can with the power that I have to help Democrats do that in Texas.